The night the Mapleyard lofts burned. I stood barefoot on the asphalt and watched everything I owned turn into ash. I thought the worst part was the heat, or the smell of melting plastic, or the fact that I had nowhere to sleep. I was wrong. The real devastation started when I called my parents and they told me it was not their problem. It took a quiet investigator to show me the fire was just the smokescreen for their betrayal. The smell hit me before I even reached the third-floor landing. It was not the comfortable, nostalgic scent of a fireplace in winter, or the charred aroma of a neighbor burning toast. It was chemical and sharp, a biting odor that coated the back of my throat like swallowed pennies. I paused, my hand gripping the cold metal railing of the stairwell, and frowned. My shift at the law firm had run 2 hours late, buried under a mountain of discovery paperwork for a merger that paid more than I would make in 5 years, and my brain felt fuzzy with exhaustion. I just wanted to take off my heels, pour a glass of cheap red wine, and stare at the ceiling until my heart rate slowed down to a sleeping rhythm. But the smell was wrong. I took the last few steps up to the hallway of Mapleyard Lofts. The building was an old textile mill converted into apartments, the kind of place that billed itself as industrial chic to justify the exposed brick that leaked drafty air in November. Usually, the hallway smelled of floor wax and whatever eager 20-something in 3B was cooking for dinner. Tonight, it smelled like burning rubber and old insulation. I walked toward my door, Unit 304, my keys jangling in my hand. Silence hung heavy in the corridor, which felt bizarrely oppressive. Then, a thud echoed from the floor below. It sounded like someone dropping a heavy textbook, followed by a muffled shout. I stopped at my door. A thin gray wisp curled out from beneath the frame of the utility closet at the far end of the hall. My chest tightened. I looked up at the red strobe light mounted on the ceiling. It was dark. The silence remained unbroken. No siren, no bell, just the creeping hiss of something consuming oxygen behind the walls. Then the door to 305 flew open. Mr. Henderson, who usually only opened his door to complain about noise, stood there in a tattered bathrobe, his eyes wide and white in the dim light. He did not look at me. He looked at the ceiling. "Fire!" he screamed, the word tearing out of his throat raw and terrified. "Get out!" The scream broke the trance, as if waiting for his cue. The hallway smoke detector finally chirped, a weak, singular beep that sounded like a dying battery, before the main alarm finally kicked in. But it did not ring with the authoritative, ear-splitting clatter I remembered from drill days. It buzzed intermittently, a low, grinding groan that sounded more like a mechanical failure than a warning. I fumbled with my keys, panic making my fingers clumsy. I needed my laptop. I needed my birth certificate. I needed the cat. No, I didn't have a cat anymore. Why was I thinking about a cat? A sudden, concussive boom shook the floorboards beneath my feet. Heat, physical and violent, rolled up the stairwell I had just climbed. "Leave it, mister!" Henderson roared, already sprinting toward the far exit. I turned back to the stairs. Thick, black smoke was billowing up the well now, moving faster than smoke should move. It churned like a living thing, oily and dense. I saw a lick of orange flame curl around the banister of the second floor, climbing the wood with terrifying speed. It was not meandering. It was racing. I dropped my keys. I didn't mean to, but my hands simply refused to hold them. I still had my phone clutched in my left hand, my knuckles white. I ran. I followed Mr. Henderson toward the fire escape at the end of the hall. The air grew hotter with every step, the temperature jumping 10 degrees, then 20. Above us, the sprinkler heads hissed and sputtered. A few drops of dirty, brown water spit onto the carpet, followed by a pathetic drizzle that wouldn't have extinguished a candle, let alone the inferno roaring beneath us. I shoved the heavy exit bar and tumbled out onto the metal grate of the fire escape. The cool night air of Briar Glen hit my face, shocking in its contrast. Below, in the alley, I could hear sirens wailing in the distance, getting louder. I scrambled down the metal stairs, the heels I had forgotten to take off clanging against the grating. I tripped on the last flight, skinning my knee, but the adrenaline masked the pain. I kicked the shoes off, letting them fall into the dumpster below, and hit the pavement barefoot. The asphalt was cold and gritty against my soles. I ran until I reached the curb across the street, joining a cluster of residents huddled under orange streetlights. We were a motley, terrified group. A girl from the first floor was clutching a toaster. Mr. Henderson was shivering, his bathrobe falling open. We turned back to look at our home. The fire was not behaving like a normal accident. I had worked enough insurance cases to know that residential fires usually started in a kitchen or a bedroom and moved outward. This was different. The flames were surging up from the ground floor, specifically near the utility area where the main breakers and gas lines were housed. But they were traveling vertically, straight up the internal walls, bypassing the heavy timber beams and shooting through the ventilation shafts. It looked like the building was being eaten from the inside out. Glass shattered as the windows of my apartment, my sanctuary, blew out. A tongue of fire licked the night sky. My knees gave out. I sat down hard on the curb, the rough concrete biting into my skin. Everything I owned, my paralegal certification framed on the wall, the vintage dress I had bought for my 33rd birthday, the photo albums I hadn't digitized yet, gone. A fire truck screeched to a halt in front of us. The air brakes hissing. Firefighters in heavy turnout gear leaped off, hoses already in hand. They moved with practiced urgency, shouting commands that were swallowed by the roar of the fire. I pulled my emergency blanket tighter around my shoulders. Someone had draped it over me, though I didn't remember who. To my left, near the front of the engine, I saw a man in a gray jumpsuit. I recognized him. It was the building's maintenance guy. I didn't know his name, but I knew his face. He was the one who always sighed loudly when you asked him to fix a leaky faucet. He was shouting at a fire captain, waving his hands frantically. "The panel was fine yesterday," the maintenance worker yelled. His voice was high, pitched with panic. "I checked the breakers myself. There is no way it sparked on its own. It was fine." The captain said something I couldn't hear, gesturing for the man to move back behind the safety line. The maintenance worker shook his head violently. He looked at the building, his face pale in the flickering orange light. He looked terrified, not just of the fire, but of something else. He muttered something that looked like, "I'm not taking this," and then, abruptly, he turned and walked away. He didn't go toward the group of tenants. He walked straight down the street, disappearing into the shadows of the block, away from the police cars that were just arriving to take statements. He never came back. I watched him go, a strange coldness settling in my stomach that had nothing to do with the night air. Why run? If it was an accident, why run? My phone buzzed in my hand. It was the only tether I had left to the world. I looked at the screen. 11% battery. I needed help. I needed a place to sleep. I needed my parents. I dialed the landline at the house in Oak Ridge. My parents, Randall and Janine, were old-fashioned. They kept their cell phones off after 9 in the evening, claiming nothing good happened after the news ended. But the landline was always on in the kitchen. It rang 4 times. I could picture the kitchen perfectly. The granite countertops, the pristine white cabinets, the stainless steel fridge that was always stocked with sparkling water. It was a fortress of comfort, a place where bad things were not allowed to happen. "Hello?" My mother's voice. She sounded groggy. "Mom." I choked out. The tears I had been holding back finally broke. "Mom, it's Maddie." "Maddie? Do you know what time it is?" "The building." I sobbed. "My apartment. It's on fire. Mom, it's all gone. I'm on the street." There was a pause. I expected a gasp. I expected the rustle of sheets as she woke my father. I expected the immediate, primal demand for my location so they could come get me. Instead, there was a sigh, a long, weary exhalation of breath. "Are you hurt?" she asked. Her tone was clinical, like she was asking if I had finished my homework. "No, I got out, but I don't have shoes. I don't have anything. I'm just watching it burn." "Well, that is unfortunate," she said. "Unfortunate." The word hung in the air between us. as cold as the pavement under my feet. "Can you come get me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Or can I come there? I just need a place for tonight. Just tonight. I can figure it out tomorrow." Silence again. Then, I heard a muffled voice in the background. "My father." "Who is it?" Randall asked. "It's Madeline. Her apartment is on fire. Tell her we're sleeping." The blood drained from my face. I heard him clearly. He didn't ask if I was alive. He didn't ask if I was safe. "Mom?" I whispered. "You're grown." "Maddie," Janine said. Her voice was flat, stripped of any maternal cadence. "You are 33 years old. This isn't our problem. You have insurance, don't you? You have savings. You need to handle your own crises. Mom, please, I'm barefoot on the curb. Randall says no," she said. And for a second, I thought I heard a flicker of hesitation. But she crushed it instantly. "We can't have you dragging chaos into this house. We have a lot going on right now. Figure it out. Madeline." Click, the line went dead. I stared at the phone, the screen illuminating my dirty, tear-streaked face. I dialed again. I couldn't help it. It had to be a mistake. They had to be half asleep, dreaming, confused. It rang once, then it went to voicemail. They had unplugged the line. I sat there for a long time, the heat of the fire on my face and the ice in my chest warring for dominance. I was 33? Yes. I was a paralegal. I paid my taxes. I called them on Sundays. I bought them anniversary gifts. I had done everything right. And yet, when the world burned down, I was strictly a liability. They refused to underwrite. I stood up. My legs shook, but I forced them to hold me. I wasn't going to beg. Not again. I scrolled through my phone and found a motel 3 miles away. The Starlight Inn. It was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour. But it was cheap. I called a rideshare. The driver looked at my soot-stained clothes and bare feet and didn't say a word. Just turned up the heat. At the motel desk, the clerk, a man with a jagged scar on his chin, looked me over. $68 a night. He grunted. I handed him my credit card. My fingers were black with soot. He swiped it. He frowned. Swiped it again. Declined. He said. My stomach dropped. I knew I was close to the limit. Student loans and car repairs had been brutal this month. But I thought I had at least $100 of clearance. Try it again. I pleaded. "Please." He sighed and typed the numbers in manually. It went through. I walked to room 104, collapsed onto the lumpy mattress that smelled of stale cigarettes, and curled into a ball. My phone buzzed. A text from my bank. "Alert. Your account is overdrawn. A $35 fee has been assessed." I laughed. It was a dry hacking sound that turned into a cough. I had done everything right. I had a degree. I had a career. I had a budget. And one spark had reduced me to a woman with negative $35 to her name and parents who wouldn't answer the phone. I didn't sleep. I watched the water stain on the ceiling change colors as the neon sign outside flickered from red to blue. Morning brought no relief. Only a headache that pounded behind my eyes like a hammer. I showered in lukewarm water, scrubbing the smell of smoke from my hair with a tiny bar of generic soap. I put my dirty clothes back on because I had no choice. I checked my email. There was a message from Kelsey Rourke, the property manager for Maple Yard Lofts. The subject line read, "Important update regarding incident." I opened it. "Dear residents, we are devastated by the event last night. Please be assured that Northline Residential Group is working tirelessly to resolve this. We ask that you please refrain from speaking to outside parties, media, or independent investigators to ensure a smooth insurance process for everyone. Speculation will only delay your settlements. We are here for you. Sincerely, Kelsey Rourke." My paralegal brain twitched. Refrain from speaking to outside parties. That wasn't standard condolence language. That was damage control. Smooth insurance process. That was a carrot dangled to buy silence. It felt rehearsed, corporate, and oddly controlling for a message sent less than 12 hours after a disaster. I grabbed my bag and left the room. I needed to see it in the daylight. The police had cordoned off the block. but residents were being allowed to approach the sidewalk to speak with the fire marshal's deputies. The building was a blackened skeleton. The roof had collapsed in 2 places, and the windows were gaping black eyes. I walked up to the yellow tape. A deputy with a clipboard nodded at me. "Name?" he asked. "Madeline Sanders, Unit 304. He checked a list. "You can go up with an escort to retrieve essentials if the structure is sound in your quadrant, but only 5 minutes. I followed a firefighter up the blackened stairwell. The smell was overpowering now, wet and rotten. We reached the 3rd floor. The carpet was a soggy mess of ash and water. I stopped at my door. It was still standing, though the paint had blistered into black bubbles, but something was wrong. When the fire department clears a room, they slap a sticker on the door, a primary search marker. I had seen them on the doors downstairs, but my door was clean. There was no sticker, and there was something else. The brass number 304 was gone. In its place, someone had slapped a piece of blue painter's tape over the spot where the numbers had been. Why? I looked at the firefighter. "Why is my number taped over?" He shrugged behind his mask. "Probably maintenance marking units for the demo crew." "Hurry up, miss." I went inside. My apartment was a ruin of water damage and smoke, but the fire hadn't consumed the bedroom. I grabbed my jewelry box, my passport, and a bag of clothes that smelled like a campfire. I shoved them into a trash bag the firefighter gave me. As we walked back out, I saw Deirdre Lane standing in the hallway near the stairwell. Deirdre was a quiet woman, a librarian who lived in 302. She looked frail, her eyes red-rimmed and darting nervously. "Deirdre?" I asked. She jumped, clutching her purse to her chest. "Oh, Madeline, you're okay." "I'm okay," I said. "Did you lose everything?" She shook her head rapidly. "Mostly smoke, but, Madeline, I heard it." "Heard what?" "Before the alarm, before the smoke. I was in the kitchen getting water. I heard glass break, downstairs, like a window smashing, and then a whoosh. Like when you light a gas grill but leave the gas on too long." My mind raced. Glass breaking, an accelerant ignition, that matched the speed of the fire. "Deirdre, you have to tell the fire marshal," I said, gripping her arm gently. "That proves it wasn't just an electrical short." Her eyes widened in terror. She pulled her arm away. No, I can't." "Why?" "The management. Kelsey. She called me this morning. She said if we start spreading rumors, we could be liable for slander. She said we could get sued and lose our deposit refunds. I can't afford a lawsuit. Madeline, I just want my deposit back so I can move." She wasn't just scared. She was terrified. "Deirdre, that's intimidation," I said, my voice hardening. "They can't—" "I have to go," she whispered. She hurried down the stairs, almost tripping in her haste to get away from me. I stood in the blackened hallway, the silence ringing in my ears. A missing door sticker, a taped-over number, a maintenance man who ran away. A neighbor terrified of being sued for telling the truth. I walked back out to the street, my trash bag of belongings over my shoulder. I felt small and exposed. I needed an ally. I pulled out my phone and called Cameron. My brother was 6 years older, a mid-level manager at a logistics firm. He was the golden child, the one who never missed a Sunday dinner, the one who knew how to smooth over Randall's tempers and Janine's moods. He answered on the second ring. "Maddie, I heard about the fire. Are you safe?" "I'm safe," I said, leaning against a lamppost. "Physically. Anyway, Cam, I called Mom and Dad last night. They wouldn't help me. Dad wouldn't even get on the phone." Cameron sighed. The sound was painfully similar to our mother's sigh from the night before. "I know, Maddie. Mom told me. Look, they're going through a lot right now." "A lot?" I snapped. "My house burned down. Cameron, I slept in a motel with a needle bucket in the bathroom. What could they possibly be going through that's worse than that?" "You know how Dad gets with his blood pressure," Cameron said, his voice taking on that soothing, mediating tone I hated. "And the business has been stressful. They just don't have the bandwidth for a crisis right now. I'm their daughter, not a crisis. Maddie, listen to me," he said, his voice dropping lower. Don't drag them into this. Don't go over there demanding things. They're already stressed to the breaking point. If you push them, they'll just cut you off completely. You know that. It felt scripted. Don't drag them into this, as if this was a mess I had created. A spilled glass of milk, rather than a catastrophe that had happened to me. Can you help me? I asked quietly. Can you lend me $500? Just until the insurance check clears. There was a long pause. I can send you $200, he said finally. But don't tell Janine and Maddie. Just keep your head down. Focus on the insurance. Don't make waves. Don't make waves. I hung up. $200. It was better than nothing, but the condition attached to it, silence, weighed heavier than the money. I went back to the motel. The day passed in a blur of calls to the insurance company, the bank, and the DMV. By evening, I was exhausted. I sat on the edge of the bed, eating a vending machine sandwich that tasted like cardboard. My phone beeped, a voicemail notification. I frowned. I hadn't heard it ring. I checked the log. It was from Dad's cell phone. Timestamp, 9:45 p.m. last night. Right after I had called the house. He must have pocket-dialed me. I pressed play, holding the phone up to my ear. There was the sound of rustling fabric, then the muffled slam of a car door. I told you the timing was tight. Randall's voice said. It was faint, muffled by denim or leather, but unmistakably him. He sounded agitated. Another voice, deeper, mumbled something unintelligible. No, Randall snapped. The building situation had to be resolved before the quarter ended. If Northline finds out we didn't... Static crackled loud and harsh. Then, a sharp click as the call cut off. I lowered the phone slowly. The building situation. Before the quarter ended, my father was a residential developer, but he worked in single-family zoning 2 towns over. He had no business with Mapleyard Lofts. He had no business with Northline Residential Group. I replayed the message. The building situation had to be resolved. I looked at the blackened soot still under my fingernails. I thought about the maintenance man running away. I thought about Deirdre's fear. I thought about my mother saying, "This isn't our problem." A cold chill that had nothing to do with the motel's air conditioning settled into my bones. Maybe it wasn't their problem because they had already solved it. I saved the voicemail. Then I backed it up to the cloud. Then I emailed the file to myself. I lay back on the pillow, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. I wasn't crying anymore. The tears had dried up, replaced by a low, humming vibration of suspicion. I was done being the daughter who did everything right. If they wanted to treat me like a stranger, I would start looking at them like a stranger. And if I looked closely enough, I had a terrible feeling I was going to see smoke. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I just listened to the sirens wailing in the distance, waiting for the morning to come so I could start digging through the ashes, the morning after the fire. I woke up with the taste of ash still coating the roof of my mouth. I was in room 104 of the Starlight Inn, a space that smelled of lemon disinfectant and stale tobacco. My phone sat on the nightstand, plugged into a charger I had borrowed from the front desk. Buzzing with a relentless stream of notifications, I sat up, my head throbbing. It was time to deal with the logistics of ruin. I dialed the number for my renter's insurance provider. I had been with them for 5 years, paying my premiums automatically every month. Believing that if the worst happened, I would be covered. I was about to learn the difference between coverage and protection. The adjuster's name was Greg. He sounded young, overworked, and entirely indifferent to the fact that I was wearing the same clothes I had fled my burning home in. "Ms. Sanders," Greg said, his voice typing in the background. "I see the claim initiation. Total loss due to fire. Okay, we are going to need an itemized list of every single item in the apartment. Furniture, electronics, clothing, kitchenware, everything." "Everything?" I asked, rubbing my temple. "Greg, I owned that stuff for 10 years. I don't have receipts for a spatula I bought in 2015. Estimates are fine for smaller items," Greg said. "But for anything over $500, We will need proof of purchase or a photo. And keep in mind, your policy is an actual cash value policy, not replacement cost. My stomach dropped. I knew what that meant, but I hadn't looked at my policy declarations in years. Actual cash value meant they weren't going to pay me what it cost to buy a new sofa. They were going to pay me what a 10-year-old sofa was worth on the used market, which was effectively nothing. So you are telling me, I said, my voice rising, that if I bought a laptop for $1,200 3 years ago, you're going to give me, what, $200? Depreciation applies. Ms. Sanders, Greg said, his tone monotone. Look, get me the list. The sooner you upload it, the sooner we can cut a check. But frankly, with your coverage limits, you are looking at a maximum payout of $15,000 for personal property. $15,000. That sounded like a lot of money until you tried to replace an entire life with it. First, last, and security deposit on a new apartment in Briar Glen would eat $6,000 of that immediately. A new wardrobe suitable for a law office would take another $2,000. Furniture, bedding, dishes, food. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. I was financially ruined. I had done the math in my head a dozen times since escaping the building. But hearing it from Greg made it real. I was 33 years old, and I was worth less than the limit on a credit card I couldn't pay off. A new email pinged on my phone. It was from Northline Residential Group. The subject line was promising: Emergency Housing Assistance for Displaced Tenants. I opened it, desperate for a lifeline. Dear resident, we understand the immense difficulty you are facing. As a gesture of goodwill, Northline Residential Group has secured temporary housing vouchers for a block of extended stay suites in downtown Briar Glen. These vouchers will cover your lodging for 30 days while you assess your next steps. To activate your voucher, please sign the attached relief agreement and return it to the management office by 5 o'clock today. I felt a surge of relief so potent it made me dizzy. 30 days, a month to breathe, a month to find a new apartment without burning through my meager savings at the motel. I clicked the attachment. It was a 3-page PDF. My thumb scrolled through the boilerplate language: dates, locations, code of conduct. Then I stopped. My paralegal training, drilled into me by 7 years of reviewing contracts for high-stakes mergers, slammed the brakes on my relief. I zoomed in on Section 4, Paragraph B. In consideration of the receipt of this housing voucher, the tenant hereby releases, waives, discharges, and covenants not to sue Northline Residential Group, its owners, officers, agents, and affiliates from any and all liability, claims, demands, actions, and causes of action whatsoever arising out of or related to any loss, damage, or injury, including death, that may be sustained by the tenant. I read it twice, then a third time. They were not offering help. They were buying immunity. If I signed this to get a bed to sleep in, I would be signing away my right to sue them if it turned out the fire was their fault. And considering the maintenance man I had seen fleeing the scene, and the alarm that hadn't rung, and the sprinklers that had sputtered, signing this document would be legal suicide. I couldn't sign it, but I also couldn't afford not to. I needed advice, real advice. I dialed Arthur Penhaligon, the senior partner at the firm where I worked. Arthur was a cautious, fastidious man who wore bow ties and treated the law like a delicate surgical instrument. He wasn't a litigator, but he knew contracts better than anyone. Madeline, Arthur said when he picked up, I heard the news. Are you all right? I'm alive. Arthur, I said, but I need you to put your lawyer hat on for 10 seconds. Northline just sent me a housing voucher. It comes with a liability release. Read it to me, he said. I read him the clause. When I finished, the silence on the line was heavy. Do not sign that, Madeline, Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave. That is not standard language for emergency relief. That is a settlement release masquerading as a charity voucher. That is what I thought, I said. But Arthur, I have nowhere to go. I can't afford this motel for more than another 2 nights. I cannot represent you officially, Arthur said, slipping into his professional disclaimer mode. It would be a conflict of interest given our firm's real estate holdings. However, speaking as your friend, that clause is unusually aggressive. It suggests they are worried about secondary liability. If they were confident this was a freak accident, they would just give you the voucher to keep the press happy. If they are locking you down this fast, they are hiding something. What do I do? You stall. He said, tell them you need to have counsel review it. See if they blink. But Madeline, if you sign that, you are done. No matter what the fire investigation finds, you will have zero recourse. I thanked him and hung up. I felt nauseous. The voucher was a trap. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my soot-stained hands. I had two options: sign the paper and sell my rights for a month of shelter, or refuse and be homeless in 48 hours. There was a third option. I dialed my parents again. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to be steady. I would not cry. I would not beg. I would simply present a logistical problem that needed a logistical solution. I wouldn't ask for money. I wouldn't ask to move in. Janine answered on the third ring. Hello? Mom, it's Madeline. Please don't hang up. I am not going to hang up. Madeline, she said, though her tone suggested it was a near thing. I am just very busy. I know. I said, I am not asking for money. I am not asking to stay with you. Oh, she said. The tension in her voice evaporated slightly. Well, that is good. Because your father is not in a place to handle guests. I just need to store some things. I said, I managed to salvage a few boxes from the apartment. My winter clothes, my books, some documents. I can't keep them in the motel room. Can I just drop them in your garage? Just for a few weeks until I find a new lease? There was a silence on the other end that stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. I don't think that is a good idea, Janine said finally. What? I asked, stunned. It is just boxes. Mom, they won't take up any room. It is clutter. Madeline, she said, her voice sharpening. We are trying to declutter right now. Your father hates having things piled up. And frankly, bringing things that smell of smoke into the house, it is just invasive. My life had burned to the ground, and my mother was worried about the smell of smoke in her garage. Mom, I said, fighting to keep the anger out of my voice, it is a 2-car garage. You have plenty of space. Why did you have so much stuff anyway? She asked, pivoting the conversation with dizzying speed. If you lived a simpler life, you wouldn't be in this position. You always have to live in the city. In those old buildings, it was your choices that led you here. Madeline, my choices? I asked, my grip on the phone tightening. My choice to live near my job? My choice to pay rent? Mom, the building caught fire. I didn't light it. Well, you are the one dealing with the consequences, she said. Then, her tone shifted. It became lower, more probing. Are you planning to sue anyone? She asked. The question came out of nowhere. It wasn't a natural follow-up to a conversation about storage boxes. What? I asked. The building owners. She said, or the neighbors. Are you planning to make a legal issue out of this? Because lawsuits are expensive, Madeline, and they drag on for years. It is usually better to just move on. Why are you asking me that? I said, I haven't even brushed my teeth properly in 2 days. Mom, I am not thinking about lawsuits. I am thinking about where to put my winter coat. Good, she said, sounding relieved. That is smart. Just move forward. Dwelling on it won't help. I need to see you. I said, I am coming over. No, Madeline, I am coming over. Mom, I need to drop these things off whether you want them or not, because I have nowhere else to put them. I will leave them in the driveway if I have to. I hung up before she could say no. I packed my meager belongings into the rental car I had authorized on my credit card, another debt I couldn't afford, and drove out of Briar Glen toward Oak Ridge. The drive took 30 minutes, taking me from the grimy, smoke-stained reality of the city to the pristine, manicured silence of the suburbs. My parents lived in a large, 2-story colonial on a street where the lawns were cut with laser precision. I pulled into the driveway. The house looked exactly as it always did. Imposing, perfect, and utterly devoid of warmth. I walked to the front door and rang the bell. I didn't use my key. I felt like a stranger. Janine opened the door. She was wearing a beige cardigan and pearl earrings, her hair perfectly coiffed. She looked at my soot-streaked jeans and the dark circles under my eyes with a mixture of pity and distaste. "Madeline," she said. I walked past her into the foyer. The house smelled of lemon polish and potpourri. It was suffocatingly clean. "Where is Dad?" I asked. "He is working," she said quickly. Closing the door, "He is on a very important conference call. He cannot be disturbed." I walked toward his study. The door was closed. "Randall," I called out. "Madeline, stop!" Janine hissed, grabbing my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "I told you, he is busy. Do not go in there." I looked at the closed door. I could hear nothing from inside. No voice, no typing, just silence. "Fine," I said, pulling my arm away. "I will just leave the boxes in the garage." I turned and walked toward the door that connected the kitchen to the garage. Janine followed me, her heels clicking rapidly on the hardwood. "You can't just dump things here," she said. I opened the garage door and stepped down onto the concrete floor. The garage was as tidy as the house, organized with bins and racks. My father's luxury sedan was parked on the left. I walked toward the workbench on the far wall, looking for a clear spot to set down the plastic bin I was carrying. That was when I saw it. On the corner of the workbench, pushed hastily behind a stack of gardening magazines, was a pile of mail. It wasn't the usual catalogs or flyers. These were business envelopes, thick and official. I recognized the logo on the top envelope immediately. Redwood Community Bank, but it was the red stamped text on the front that caught my eye. Final notice. Default imminent. I froze. My father prided himself on his financial literacy. He gave lectures on fiscal responsibility at Thanksgiving dinners. He did not get final notices. I reached out to touch the envelope. "Don't touch that!" Janine lunged past me, her body slamming into the workbench as she snatched the stack of mail. She held it against her chest, her eyes wide and wild. "Mom?" I said, stepping back. "What is that?" "It is nothing," she said, her breath coming fast. "Just junk mail. Spam. They send these things to scare you. It is a marketing tactic." It said default. "Mom, is Dad in trouble?" "No," she snapped. "Everything is fine. We are fine. You are the one in trouble. Madeline, look at you. You are a mess." She was deflecting, aggressive and panicked. I looked at the mail clutched to her chest. I saw another envelope peeking out from the bottom of the stack. It wasn't from a bank. It was from a law firm. Garrison Associates. I recognized that name. They were the firm that represented Northline Residential Group. I had seen their letterhead on the housing voucher release form this morning. "Why do you have mail from Northline's lawyers?" I asked. "I don't know what you're talking about," Janine said. She turned her back to me, shoving the mail into a drawer and locking it. "You are imagining things. The stress is making you paranoid." "I am not paranoid," I said slowly. "I am a paralegal. I know what a demand letter looks like. Just leave your box and go." "Madeline," she said, her back still turned to me. Her voice was trembling. "Please, just go." I set the box down on the concrete. I looked at my mother's rigid back. I realized then that the fortress was not just closed to me. It was crumbling from the inside. I walked out. I didn't say goodbye. I drove back to the motel in silence, my mind racing. My parents were hiding financial ruin. That explained why they wouldn't help me with money. But it didn't explain the cruelty. It didn't explain the letter from Northline's lawyers, unless their financial ruin and my burning building were connected. I got back to the motel room, just as my phone rang. It was a local number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Madeline? This is Kelsey Rourke, the property manager." Her voice was warm, professional, and dripping with false intimacy. "Hi, Kelsey. I wanted to check in on you." She said, "I saw you haven't returned the housing voucher agreement yet. We really want to get you into a comfortable suite tonight, the Starlight Inn. Well, we know it isn't ideal, I am having a lawyer review the release. I said, "Oh," Kelsey laughed. It was a dismissive, tinkling sound. That is just standard liability language. Madeline, corporate requires it. It doesn't mean anything. We just want to help you move forward. We want to get this whole ugly business behind us, right? I didn't answer. You know, Kelsey continued, her voice lowering confidentially. I was just thinking, your father, Randall, he would really want you to be settled. He hates uncertainty. I froze. The phone felt like ice against my ear. I never told you my father's name. I said, there was a pause, a split second of silence where the smooth corporate veneer cracked. Oh, well, Kelsey stammered, recovering quickly. It must be in your file, on your emergency contact list. My emergency contact is my brother, Cameron, I said, and my lease application is 5 years old. My father isn't listed on it. Another pause, longer this time. Well, I must have heard it from one of the neighbors then, Kelsey said, her voice tightening. Look, Madeline, the offer for the suite expires at 5. We just want to help. Think about it. She hung up. I stared at the phone. She knew Randall. She knew him by name, and she knew his personality. He hates uncertainty. My parents weren't just ignoring the fire. They were in the room with the people managing it. I needed to find the source of the fire. The physical source. If I could prove negligence. The liability release would be voidable, and Northline, and whoever was working with them, would be exposed. I pulled up the contact info for Hearthstone Facilities. The company that managed the building's maintenance, I called their main office, Hearthstone Facilities. How can I help you? Hi, this is Madeline Sanders. I am a tenant at Maple Yard Lofts. I need a copy of the maintenance logs for the building from the last 6 months, specifically regarding the electrical panels and the sprinkler system. I am sorry, the receptionist said. We can't provide those. Why not? I have a right to know if the building was safe. Ma'am, those records are unavailable. She said, they were lost in the fire. I blinked. Excuse me? They were in the on-site office, she said. They burned. I laughed. It was a sharp, angry sound. You are a facilities management company. I said, you have a central server. You have cloud backups. You don't keep the only copy of your maintenance records in a paper binder in the basement of a 100-year-old building. That is impossible. I am just telling you what I was told, the receptionist said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The files are gone. We had a server migration issue. We can't help you. She hung up. A server migration issue, coincidentally occurring at the exact moment the building burned down. I was pacing the small motel room now. Fueled by adrenaline and caffeine, they were scrubbing the record. They were erasing the history of the building. My phone buzzed again. A text message. It was from Deirdre Lane, the nervous neighbor who had heard the glass break. I opened it. I shouldn't have said anything. Someone came to my door. I typed back immediately. Deirdre? Who came to your door? Are you okay? I watched the 3 dots appear, then disappear, then appear again, then nothing. I called her. Straight to voicemail. Deirdre, call me. I texted, please, you aren't safe if you stay quiet. We need to stick together. No reply. I felt a cold prickle of fear on the back of my neck. They had gotten to her. Maybe they threatened her with a lawsuit. Maybe they offered her money. Or maybe they just stood in her doorway and let her imagine what would happen if she spoke up. I couldn't sleep. It was 2 a.m. I opened my laptop and connected to the motel's spotty Wi-Fi. If I couldn't get the internal records, I would get the public ones. I went to the county clerk's database. I searched for Maple Yard Lofts. I pulled up the deed history. Northline Residential Group had bought the building 2 years ago. Then I went to the State Department of Insurance query tool. It was a clunky, outdated website, but it held the secrets of liability. I searched the property address. 2 years ago. The building was insured by Liberty Mutual. 18 months ago. The policy was canceled. Then it was picked up by a high-risk carrier, Titan Indemnity. 6 months ago. Titan dropped them. 3 months ago. They were picked up by a surplus lines carrier, the kind of insurance company you go to when no reputable company will touch you. Why? I dug deeper. I found a citation from the Briar Glen Fire Marshal's office dated 4 months ago. Violation. Sprinkler system pressure insufficient on floors 3 and 4. Main suppression valve corroded. Recommendation. Immediate replacement. Status. Pending reinspection. There was no record of the reinspection, but there was something else. A permit application filed 2 weeks after the violation. Permit. Exterior cosmetic renovation. They had money for a cosmetic renovation. They had money to paint the brick and put up new signs. But they didn't have money to fix the sprinklers. I looked at the date of the insurance change. They switched to the surplus carrier right after the violation. They knew the system was failing. They knew they were sitting on a powder keg, and instead of fixing it, they found an insurer who would write a policy for a building destined to burn. And they waited. And my father? Where did he fit in? I thought about the voicemail. The building situation had to be resolved before the quarter ended. I thought about the bank notice. Default imminent. If Northline needed the insurance money to cover a bad investment, and my father needed money to cover a default. I looked at the screen. The blue light illuminating the dark motel room. I wasn't just looking at negligence. I was looking at a transaction. I saved every document to my hard drive. Then I emailed them to Arthur. Then I put them on a flash drive and hid it in the lining of my purse. I turned off the light, but the darkness felt heavier than before. I wasn't just a victim of a fire anymore. I was a witness to a crime, and the people who committed it knew exactly who I was, where I was sleeping, and who my parents were. In fact, they probably had my father on speed dial. The charred skeleton of Maple Yard Lofts looked different in the daylight of the third day. The initial chaos of flashing lights and screaming tenants had been replaced by a heavy, mournful silence, broken only by the sound of wind whistling through the broken windows. A chain-link fence had been erected around the perimeter, covered in green mesh to keep prying eyes from seeing the ruin inside. I stood near the gate, waiting. I had been told that the county fire investigator wanted to speak with tenants who had been in the building when the alarm, or lack thereof, went off. A gray sedan pulled up to the curb, indistinguishable from 1,000 other government vehicles. The man who stepped out was not what I expected. I had anticipated someone like the firefighters. Burly, loud, wearing heavy gear. Investigator Silas Mercer was slight, wearing a wrinkled beige trench coat over a suit that had seen better decades. He moved with a quiet, bird-like precision, stepping over a puddle of soot-blackened water without looking down. He didn't look at the crowd of onlookers. He looked at the building, his eyes narrowing as if he were reading a language only he understood. He approached the gate where a security guard from Northline Residential was posted. Mercer flashed a badge, not with a flourish, but with a weary necessity. The guard stepped aside. I walked up to the fence. "Excuse me," I said. "Are you the investigator?" Mercer stopped. He turned slowly to look at me. His face was lined, his expression neutral to the point of blankness. "I am Investigator Mercer," he said. His voice was soft, dry as paper. "And you are?" "Madeline Sanders." I said, "Unit 304. I was inside when it started." He didn't pull out a notebook immediately. He just looked at me. "Unit 304, he repeated. "Third floor, north side, near the stairwell." "Yes." He nodded, finally producing a small, weather-beaten notepad from his pocket. "Tell me what you smelled, Ms. Sanders. Not what you saw. What you smelled. And be specific. It wasn't wood smoke," I said, closing my eyes to recall the sensation. It was chemical, sharp, like burning plastic or rubber, and something sweet, like gasoline, but heavier. Mercer wrote something down, very small handwriting. "And the alarm?" he asked. "It lagged," I said. "My neighbors screamed before the alarm went off, and the sprinklers, they just spit water. It wasn't a spray, it was a dribble." Mercer stopped writing. He looked up, his gaze piercing. "A dribble?" "Yes. Brown water, low pressure." He hummed, a low sound in his throat. "I walked the third floor this morning. Ms. Sanders. The The structure is compromised, but the corridor is intact. I noticed something about your door. My heart skipped a beat. The tape. I said, yes. Mercer said, the unit number was removed. Covered with blue painter's tape. Was it like that before the fire? No, I said firmly. The numbers were brass. They were there when I left for work that morning. Mercer tapped his pen against his chin. Interesting. Firefighters use grease pencils or stickers to mark searched rooms. They do not use blue painter's tape, and they certainly do not take the time to remove brass numerals. What does it mean? I asked. It means someone was worried about identification, Mercer said, or someone was trying to confuse the inventory. It is odd post-incident handling. Very odd. He closed his notebook. Thank you. Ms. Sanders, if you remember anything else, specifically about maintenance personnel you saw that day, call this number. He handed me a card. It was plain white stock, just his name and a direct line. Investigator Mercer, I said as he turned to leave. Was it an accident? He paused, looking back at the blackened shell of the building. Fire is honest. Ms. Sanders, he said, it follows the laws of physics. People are the ones who lie. He walked away, slipping through the gate and vanishing into the shadows of the first-floor lobby. I left the site feeling colder than the autumn wind justified. Odd post-incident handling. That was a polite way of saying someone was tampering with the crime scene. I needed to know my rights. The release form from Northline was still sitting in my inbox, unsigned. The pressure to sign it was mounting. The motel bill was due again tomorrow, and my bank account was a red minus sign. I drove to the Briar Glen Community Center, where a flyer said a tenant advocate from Housing Aid was holding emergency hours. The advocate was a woman named Elena, with wild curly hair and a desk buried under stacks of paper. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were sharp. Sit down, honey, she said, gesturing to a folding chair. You from Maple Yard? Yes, I said. Elena sighed, rubbing her temples. You are the fifth one today. Let me guess. They offered you a voucher for the suites downtown, but only if you sign a waiver releasing them from secondary liability. Exactly. I said, is that legal? It is legal for them to ask, Elena said, leaning forward. It is also legal for you to tell them to go to hell, but they know you are desperate. It is a standard tactic. Madeline, they create a bottleneck of resources. They know insurance takes weeks to pay out. They know most of you live paycheck to paycheck. They offer an immediate solution, a warm bed, a kitchen, in exchange for your silence. My silence? Liability waivers aren't just about money. Elena explained. They usually include non-disparagement clauses, if you sign that. And then it turns out the landlord was negligent. Say, they ignored sprinkler violations. You can't sue. You can't join a class action. You can't even talk to the press without risking a breach of contract lawsuit. They are buying your compliance for the price of a hotel room. So what do? I asked. I have negative $30 in my bank account. Elena looked at me with profound sympathy. You hold out as long as you can. You lean on your renter's insurance. Do not let them starve you into signing away your rights. Once you sign, you are invisible to the law. I thanked her and walked out to my car. Lean on your renter's insurance. That was the plan. I pulled out my phone and dialed the claims department again. I needed that initial advance. Even just $2,000 would let me survive without signing Northline's poison pill. The call connected. Claim number? A voice asked. It wasn't Greg. It was a woman. Her voice clipped and efficient. I gave the number. This is Madeline Sanders. I am looking for Greg. He was handling my file. Greg is no longer on this file. The woman said, My name is Patricia. I am the senior adjuster for the Special Investigations Unit. Special Investigations? I asked, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. Why has my file moved to Special Investigations? Ms. Sanders, your file has been flagged for review, Patricia said. There are some discrepancies regarding the valuation of your property and the circumstances of the loss. What circumstances? I demanded. The building burned down. Everyone knows that. Yes. But given the scale of the claim and the open investigation by the fire marshal, we are placing a hold on all payouts until we receive the official cause of origin report. That could take months, I shouted, losing my composure. I have no shoes. Patricia, I have no home. You can't just freeze my policy. I paid my premiums. It is standard procedure for flagged claims, she said, her voice unmoved. We can't release funds if there is a potential for subrogation or other issues. Other issues? You think I burned my own apartment? We are just following protocol. Ms. Sanders, we will notify you when the review is complete. The line went dead. I sat in the parking lot, staring at the dashboard, flagged for review. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Northline pressures me to sign a release. I refuse. 2 days later, my insurance, my only lifeline, freezes up. It felt coordinated. It felt like someone was tightening a noose, cutting off every option until the only door left open was the one Northline was holding. I needed an ally. I needed Deirdre Lane, the nervous librarian who had heard the glass break. She was the witness who could blow this wide open. If she testified that she heard an explosion or a break-in before the fire, it would prove it wasn't just faulty wiring. It would prove intent. I had texted her 3 times with no response. I decided to go find her. Northline had put some of the compliant tenants, the ones who signed, in the extended stay America near the highway. I gambled that Deirdre, terrified and broke, had signed the paper. I drove to the hotel. It was a soulless beige block surrounded by asphalt. I went to the front desk. I am here to see Deirdre Lane. I told the clerk. I think she is in one of the voucher rooms. The clerk typed on his keyboard. Lane. Ah, yes. She checked out this morning. Checked out? I asked. Where did she go? He shrugged. She just dropped her key in the box and left. Did she leave a forwarding address? A number? No. She actually asked to be removed from the registry. I felt a cold drop of fear in my stomach. Deirdre was a creature of habit. She was a librarian. She didn't just vanish. Did anyone pick her up? I asked. I think a car was waiting. The clerk said, a black SUV. Looked like a town car service. A town car. Deirdre drove a 10-year-old Honda. She didn't have money for a town car. Someone had collected her. I walked back to my car, my hands shaking. They were scrubbing the board. First the maintenance logs, then the door number. Now the witness. My phone rang. The sound made me jump. It was Cameron. Maddie. He said, his voice was warm, filled with that big brother solicitude that usually comforted me. Listen, I have been worried about you. You sounded so stressed the other day. Let me buy you dinner. Real food. Not vending machine crap. I hesitated. I didn't trust anyone right now, but I was hungry. God, I was hungry. And Cameron was my brother. If I couldn't trust him, the world truly was empty. Okay, I said. Where? The Chop House on Main, he said. 7 o'clock. The Chop House was expensive. Steak and dark wood and waiters in vests. It was a place Randall used to take us for celebrations. I arrived at 7, wearing the cleanest clothes I had, jeans and a sweater I had bought at a thrift store that afternoon. Cameron was already at a booth, a glass of bourbon in front of him. He looked polished, his suit crisp, his hair perfect. He looked like he belonged to a different world than the one I was currently living in. Maddie, he said, standing up to hug me. You look tired. I am homeless. Cam, I said, sliding into the booth. Tired is the baseline. He ordered for us filet mignon, spinach, mashed potatoes, a bottle of red wine. It was decadent. It felt like a bribe. So, he said, pouring me a glass of wine. Where are you staying? Still at the motel? For now, I said, until the money runs out, which is tomorrow. I can write you a check. He said immediately, 500, maybe 1,000. I can move some things around. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful. That would save me. He nodded, taking a sip of his bourbon. We are family. Maddie. We help each other. He swirled the ice in his glass. I talked to Mom. he said casually. She's really worried about you. She has a funny way of showing it. I said, cutting into the steak. She basically accused me of arson and told me not to ruin the family name. She is just scared, Cameron said. You know how she gets. She thinks if we ignore a problem, it goes away. But she mentioned something. She said you were asking about Northline, about the owners. I put my fork down. I was asking about my rights. Cam, they are trying to force me to sign a waiver, and I found out the sprinklers were cited for violations months ago. Cameron's eyes flickered. He looked down at his plate. Maddie, look, he said, his voice dropping. I know you are angry. You have every right to be. But you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is what worth it? Justice? Is the fight worth it? He pressed. Northline is a massive company. They have teams of lawyers. If you go after them, they will bury you. They will drag this out for years. You will be bankrupt and miserable. So I should just let them get away with burning my home? I asked, my voice rising. It is not about letting them get away with it, Cameron said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. It is about self-preservation. Take the settlement, sign the paper, get the money and start over. Why make this a legal war? It will only hurt you, and it will stress Mom and Dad out to no end. You know Dad's heart isn't great? There it was, the pivot, Dad's heart, the ultimate trump card in the Sanders family deck. Why are you so worried about Northline? I asked, pulling my hand away. You work in logistics. What do you care about a property management company? I don't care about them, Cameron said, a little too quickly. I care about you. I don't want to see you destroy yourself on a crusade you can't win. He smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were tight, anxious. He checked his watch. I finished the meal in silence. The steak tasted like ash. Cameron paid the bill with a corporate card I didn't recognize. I have to get back to the office, he said as we walked out. Late shipments. You know how it is. He hugged me again. Please, Maddie, just think about the settlement. For the family. I watched him drive away in his BMW. He turned left, toward the highway that led to his office. I got in my rental car. I didn't turn the engine on immediately. I sat there, thinking about his eyes. He wasn't worried about me. He was managing me. I started the car, but I didn't go to the motel. I turned right, toward Oak Ridge, toward my parents' house. It was a hunch, a sick, twisting hunch. I parked 3 streets away from my parents' house and walked the rest of the way. Sticking to the shadows of the large oak trees that lined the sidewalk. It was 8:30 at night. I reached the edge of their lawn. The house was lit up, and there, in the driveway, was the BMW, Cameron's car. He hadn't gone to the office. He had come straight here. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Hey, Maddie? Everything okay? Where are you? I asked. I told you at the office, he said. I'm staring at a spreadsheet that is making my eyes bleed. Why? I looked at his car parked 20 feet away from me. I looked at the silhouette of him pacing in my father's study window. Just checking. I said, thanks for dinner. I hung up. He was lying. He was in the room with them. The 3 of them. Randall, Janine, Cameron. They were a closed circle. And I was on the outside, looking in. Why lie? If he was just visiting them, why lie? Because they were discussing something they didn't want me to know about. I walked back to my car. The betrayal stinging more than the cold wind. My brother wasn't a neutral party. He was an accomplice. The next morning, I was sitting in the motel lobby, using their computer because the Wi-Fi in the room was down. I was trying to find a lawyer who would take a case on contingency, but without the fire marshal's report, no one was biting. A shadow fell over the keyboard. I looked up. It was Investigator Mercer. He looked even more tired than the day before. He was holding 2 coffees. He placed one next to my hand. Black. 2 sugars. He said, How did you know? I am an investigator. Ms. Sanders, he said, sitting in the chair next to me. I observe. He took a sip of his coffee. I have a question for you. A sharp one. Ask it. I said, I ran a background check on the building's ownership structure. Mercer said, Northline Residential is a shell. It is owned by a holding company, which is owned by an investment trust. Standard obfuscation, but I also ran the vendor list, the companies that Northline pays for services. He paused, watching my face. Does anyone in your family have business ties to Northline Residential? Or Hearthstone Facilities? Or a company called Apex Capital? No, I said immediately. My father is a residential developer. He builds single-family homes in the suburbs. He has nothing to do with commercial rentals in the city. Are you sure? Mercer asked. I hesitated. I thought about the voicemail, the building situation. I thought about the meeting Cameron was lying about. I don't think so. I said, think harder, Mercer said gently. Because in arson cases involving insurance fraud, the circle is usually tight. It is rarely a stranger. He stood up. Check the vendors. Ms. Sanders. If you find a name you recognize, call me. He left me with the coffee and a terrifying seed of doubt. I opened a new browser tab. I typed in Sanders Property Solutions. That was the name of my father's LLC, the one I thought he used for his small suburban projects. The state business registry popped up. Sanders Property Solutions, LLC. Status, dissolved, 6 months ago. Dissolved? He hadn't told me he closed the business. I clicked on the filing history. There was a list of partnership disclosures from 2 years ago. Joint venture, rehabilitation project, West Side, partner, Hearthstone Facilities Management. My breath caught in my throat. Hearthstone, the maintenance company, the company that lost the logs. My father had been business partners with them. I dug deeper. I searched for Sanders Property Solutions and Northline. Nothing. Then I searched for Randall Sanders and Apex Capital, the name Mercer had mentioned. I found a PDF of a city council meeting minutes from 3 years ago. It was a zoning hearing. Speaker, Randall Sanders, representing Apex Capital regarding zoning variance for 400 block of Maple Street, Maple Yard Lofts. My father had represented the holding company that owned my building. He wasn't just a suburban builder, he was a consultant, a fixer. I sat back, the plastic chair digging into my spine. It all clicked into place. The refusal to help, the anger when I asked for money, the pressure to sign the release, Cameron's lies. They weren't refusing to help me because they were cruel. They were refusing to help me because helping me meant exposing them. If I sued Northline, I would be suing my father's business partners. Maybe even my father. If I investigated the fire, I wasn't just looking for the arsonist. I was looking for the reason my father needed an insurance payout. Default imminent, the bank notice, the dissolved LLC, the consulting work. My father was broke, and he had used my building, my home, to bail himself out. I felt a wave of nausea. I ran to the lobby bathroom and dry-heaved over the sink. When I looked in the mirror, my face was pale, my eyes wild. It wasn't containment, it was a cover-up, and I was the only loose thread they hadn't snipped yet. I went back to the computer. I printed the documents. I folded them into my pocket. I walked out of the motel. I wasn't going to call Cameron. I wasn't going to call my mother. I was going to find out exactly how much my life was worth to them. I had a feeling the number was terrifyingly low. I sat in the sterile, glass-walled lobby of Northline Residential Group, a folder of formal requests resting heavily on my knees. I had drafted the demand letter myself at 3 a.m, using the legal letterhead from a defunct firm I still had saved on my laptop. It was a bluff, but it was a loud one. I was asking for the full maintenance history of Maple Yard Lofts, the specific incident reports for the sprinkler system, and the communication logs between management and the ownership trust regarding safety violations. The receptionist, a young woman who looked like she was afraid to blink, had told me to wait. I had been waiting for 45 minutes. Finally, the frosted glass door opened. Kelsey Rourke stepped out. She wasn't smiling today. Her professional warmth had evaporated, replaced by a tight, annoyed efficiency. "Madeline," she said, not inviting me back. "We received your request." I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my thrift store slacks. And we are unable to comply," she said. On what grounds? I asked, keeping my voice steady. As a tenant who lost everything, I have a right to know the safety history of the dwelling. Privacy concerns, Kelsey said smoothly, and the ongoing inquiry. Since there is an active investigation by the fire marshal and the insurance carriers, all internal documents are frozen. We cannot release them to third parties. I am not a third party, Kelsey. I am a victim, legally, until the liability is determined. You are a claimant, she corrected. And frankly, Madeline, this aggressive posturing isn't helping your case. My case? Your settlement, she said, lowering her voice. We are still holding that suite for you. But the offer expires in 48 hours. If you sign the release, we can cut you a check for $5,000 for immediate expenses plus the housing voucher. If you keep filing these requests, well, legal will have to get involved, and that money will be tied up for years. She took a step closer. Her perfume, something floral and expensive, clashing with the stale smell of smoke that still clung to my hair. Your father wouldn't want you to struggle like this, she said. He is a pragmatic man. Be pragmatic. I felt a flash of heat up my neck. Stop bringing up my father. I am just saying, she said, checking her watch. Sign the release. Madeline, it is the only way you get paid before winter sets in. She turned and walked back through the frosted doors. The lock clicked with a finality that felt like a gavel banging down. I walked out of the building, shaking with rage. Privacy, ongoing inquiry. They were stalling. They knew I was broke, and they were betting that hunger would work faster than the truth. I drove to the site of the fire. I didn't know where else to go. The fence was still up, but I saw Investigator Mercer inside the perimeter, kneeling near where the utility room used to be. I waited until he came out. He saw me and signaled for me to follow him around the corner. Away from the North Line security guard posted at the gate, Mercer looked grim. He wiped soot from his hands with a handkerchief that was already black. You shouldn't be here, Ms. Sanders, he said quietly. I need to know. Mercer, North Line is stonewalling me. They won't give me a single sheet of paper. That is because they are scrubbing the files. Mercer said. He looked around to make sure we were alone. I can't put this in the official report yet, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The lab results on the debris samples are still pending, but my nose doesn't lie. And neither does the burn pattern. What did you find? The fire burned hot and fast in the utility corridor. He said, too fast for old insulation. It burned low, near the floor. Fire likes to go up. Ms. Sanders, when it burns sideways along the baseboards that quickly, it is usually following a trail. A trail of what? A hydrocarbon, he said. Gasoline. Maybe kerosene. There was an accelerant poured near the breaker panel. This wasn't a short circuit. Someone lit a fuse. I felt the blood drain from my face. Deirdre was right. She heard the glass break. She heard the whoosh. Arson, I whispered. Mercer nodded. But proving it in court requires the lab work, and proving who held the match is even harder. Listen to me carefully. If this was intentional, and if North Line is involved, you are not just fighting a landlord, you are fighting a felony conspiracy. Be very careful what you post online. Be very careful what you say on the phone. He gave me a hard look. And watch who you trust. Money makes people do terrible things. I left him there and went to a coffee shop to use the Wi-Fi. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely type my password. Arson. It was one thing to suspect negligence, a lazy landlord ignoring a repair. It was another thing entirely to picture someone walking into my building with a can of gas. Knowing people were sleeping upstairs, I opened my email. There was a new message in my inbox. It was from an address I didn't recognize. Truthseeker884@protonmail.com. The subject line was in all caps. Your dad knows why it burned. I froze. I looked around the coffee shop, paranoid that someone was watching me. No one looked up from their lattes. I clicked the email. There was no text in the body, just an attachment, a JPEG image. I opened it. It was a blurry photo, taken in low light, likely with a phone camera trying to capture a document on a desk. It showed the bottom half of a contract. The text was mostly illegible. washed out by the flash, but the header at the bottom of the page was clear enough to read, Consulting Agreement, Risk Mitigation, Asset Liquidation Strategy, Client, Northline, Residential Group, Consultant, Sanders Property Solutions, LLC. And there, on the signature line, was a scrawl I had seen 1,000 times on report cards, birthday checks, and permission slips. Randall J. Sanders. The date next to the signature was 3 weeks ago. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Risk mitigation, asset liquidation, liquidation. In real estate, liquidation usually meant selling. But you can't sell a building with code violations and tenant disputes easily, unless you liquidate it by turning it into an insurance claim. My father signed a contract to help them liquidate the building 3 weeks before it burned down. I slammed the laptop shut. I couldn't breathe. The air in the coffee shop felt thin. I needed to scream. I needed to break something, but I didn't have anything to break. I didn't even have my own coffee mug anymore. I drove to Oak Ridge. I didn't call first. I didn't care about their boundaries or their stress or their dinner plans. I pulled into the driveway. My father's car was gone, but my mother's SUV was there. I stormed to the door and pounded on it. Janine opened it, looking startled. She was holding a glass of wine. Madeline? What on earth? I pushed past her. Where is he? I demanded. Who? Randall? He's at the club. Madeline, you can't just barge in here. I turned on her in the hallway. The blurry image of the signature burned into my mind. He signed a contract. Mom, I said, my voice shaking with a fury I had never let her see. With Northline. 3 weeks ago. Janine's face went rigid. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her rouge standing out like a bruise. I don't know what you are talking about, she said, but her voice lacked its usual steel. Don't lie to me, I screamed. The sound echoed in the high ceilings of the foyer. Sanders Property Solutions. He was consulting for them. Asset liquidation. That is what the contract said. He was helping them plan this. Janine took a step back, clutching her wine glass so hard I thought it would shatter. Lower your voice, she hissed. The neighbors. Screw the neighbors, I yelled. My apartment was firebombed. Mom, an investigator told me today they used gasoline. And Dad signed a contract with the people who owned the building right before it happened. Did he know? Did he know they were going to burn it? Janine set the glass down on the console table. Her hand was trembling. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw the composure crack completely. Her face twisted into a mask of ugly, desperate fear. Stop it, she said. Stop digging. Madeline, did he know? I pressed, stepping closer. He didn't light the match, she shouted back, her voice cracking. He would never hurt anyone. He gave them advice. They were in trouble. We were in trouble. It was just business. Just business? I whispered. I could have died. Mr. Henderson could have died. But you didn't, Janine snapped, and suddenly the fear turned to anger. She glared at me with a venom that took my breath away. You are fine. Madeline, you are young. You can start over. Why are you trying to ruin the family over one bad night? One bad night. She wasn't talking about a fire. She was talking about a scandal. She was talking about her reputation. Is that what I am to you? I asked, feeling a cold numbness spreading through my chest. Collateral damage? As long as the insurance check clears and Dad keeps his club membership, it doesn't matter if I lose everything. You are being dramatic, she said, trying to regain her footing, smoothing her cardigan. We are protecting you. If this comes out, if you drag your father into a criminal investigation, do you have any idea what that will do to us? To Cameron? To you, I corrected. What it will do to you. Get out, Janine said. Her voice was cold again. The wall rebuilt. Get out of my house, and don't come back until you are ready to stop this nonsense and sign that release. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had taught me to say please and thank you and always write thank you notes. She was a stranger. I will sign the release, I said quietly. When Dad is in handcuffs, I walked out. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, just breathing. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. She had admitted it. He just gave them advice. We were in trouble, financial trouble. I needed proof of the motive. The contract was a smoking gun for involvement. But I needed to know why Randall Sanders, a man who prided himself on his ethics, would get in bed with arsonists. I started the car and drove to Redwood Community Bank. It was 4 p.m. The branch was quiet. I knew the layout. I had banked here since I was 16. Though my account was currently empty, I walked up to the teller desk. A young woman I didn't recognize was working. Perfect. Hi, I said, putting on my best stressed daughter smile. I am helping my father, Randall Sanders, organize his tax files. He is getting older, and he keeps losing track of his loan documents. I gave a sympathetic chuckle. You know how it is. He sent me to get a copy of the paperwork for the bridge loan, the one he took out last month. The teller hesitated. I technically need him present to print statements. Ma'am. Oh, I know, I said, leaning in. And I would never ask you to break the rules. I don't need the numbers. I just need to know which file it is in so I can find it in his home office. He has papers everywhere. Was it the one tied to the Oak Ridge house or the other one? I held my breath. The teller typed Randall's name into her system. She frowned at the screen. Oh, I see it here, she said. It looks like the bridge loan was collateralized against… Let me see. It says future receivables from loss event. My heart stopped. Future receivables from loss event. That meant he had borrowed money promising to pay it back with an insurance settlement. A settlement from a loss that hadn't happened yet when he took the loan. Is that the one linked to the Sanders Property Solutions account? I asked, pushing my luck. Yes, she said, but that account is currently overdrawn. The loan is past due. The system notes say he came in on Monday asking for an extension because the payout was delayed. Monday, the day after the fire. He came in to tell them the payout, my misery, was delayed. Thank you, I said, my voice faint. That helps so much. I walked out of the bank. The sunlight seemed too bright, too cheerful for the rot I had just uncovered. He had bet on the fire. He had leveraged the destruction of my home to keep his own solvent. I needed to talk to Cameron. I needed to know if he was just a messenger or if he was part of the bet. I called him. Meet me. I said, now. He tried to stall. Maddie. I am at work. I know about the bridge loan. Cameron. I know about the consulting contract. Meet me at the diner on 4th. Or I go to the police right now with what I have. He met me. He looked terrible. His tie was loosened, his eyes bloodshot. He slid into the booth opposite me and didn't order anything. How much did you know? I asked. Cameron put his head in his hands. I didn't know about the fire. Maddie, I swear to God, I thought they were just going to sell the building, or maybe declare bankruptcy. But you knew he was working for them. I said, he needed the money. Cameron whispered, Dad made some bad calls on the West Side development. He was underwater. Northline offered him a consulting fee to help them. Restructure. Restructure, I spat. Is that what we call arson now? I didn't think they would burn it, Cameron insisted. Looking up, his eyes wet. I thought they were just going to cut corners. Maybe force an evacuation with a code violation so they could break the leases and sell the land. Break the leases, I repeated. I remembered something. Something Cameron had said to me 2 months ago. You should renew your lease. Maddie, it's a great location. Lock in that rate. I stared at him. You pushed me to renew. I said slowly, 2 months ago, you told me to sign for another year. Cameron flinched. Why? I asked. If you knew they were going to restructure and force everyone out, why did you tell me to stay? He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Dad asked me to. He mumbled, why? Because… Cameron swallowed hard. Because Northline needed the building to be at 90% occupancy to qualify for the specific insurance policy they wanted. If the building was empty, the payout cap was lower. They needed tenants on the books. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. He used me. I whispered, He needed me there. He needed me to be a statistic on a rent roll so he could maximize the payout on the fire that destroyed my life. Maddie, it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. People turned to look. I didn't care. He put me in a fire trap to pad his portfolio. And you helped him. I didn't know about the fire, Cameron pleaded. I thought you would have to move out in a few months and you'd get a buyout. You didn't think, I said, standing up. You just followed orders. You are just as bad as he is. I walked out of the diner. I was done with them. I was done with the lies, the justifications, the family. I had one more lead, the maintenance worker, the one who ran away. I had been searching for him since the first night. Investigator Mercer had given me a hint. He said the previous maintenance logs were signed by a J. Miller. I had found a Jason Miller on LinkedIn who listed Hearthstone Facilities as his employer until 3 days ago. I messaged him. No reply. I found his address. It was a small apartment complex on the south side of town. I drove there. It was dark now. I waited in the parking lot. At 8 o'clock, a beat-up truck pulled in. The man who got out was the man from the fire. The one in the gray jumpsuit. He wasn't wearing the jumpsuit now. He was wearing a hoodie, looking over his shoulder. I got out of my car. Jason? He jumped, dropping his keys. He looked at me, eyes wide. You are the girl from the curb. My name is Madeline. I said, I lived in 304. I can't talk to you, he said, backing away. I signed an NDA. They said they would sue me into the ground. They are already going to blame you. Jason, I said. He stopped. What? Northline, I said, and Hearthstone. They are going to say it was your fault. They are going to say you messed up the panel. They are scrubbing the logs to make it look like negligence, not arson, unless you speak up. He stared at me, his chest heaving. They took my laptop. He said, Hearthstone. They came the next morning and took my company laptop and my phone. What did you know? I asked. The panel wasn't faulty, he said, his voice trembling. The breakers were bypassed. I found it 2 days before the fire. Someone had wired a timer into the main circuit, a heavy-duty industrial timer. Did you report it? I called my boss at Hearthstone. He said, he told me to leave it alone. He said it was a load management device installed by the owners. He told me if I touched it, I was fired. So you left it? I have 2 kids. Lady, he said, misery etched into his face. I need this job. I didn't know it was a bomb. I just thought they were stealing power or something. Will you tell the investigator? I asked. Will you tell Silas Mercer? No way, he said, shaking his head violently. These people, Northline, they know people. I've had cars following me. I'm moving to my sister's in Ohio tomorrow. I'm done. Jason, please, you better run too, he said. He unlocked his door and slipped inside. You don't know what you are touching. He slammed the door. I drove back to the Starlight Inn. My head was spinning. A timer. Bypassed breakers. It was a machine designed to burn. When I got to the motel, my keycard didn't work. I went to the front desk. The clerk looked at me with bored eyes. Your voucher expired at noon, Ms. Sanders, and the credit card on file was declined for the extension, but I have nowhere to go, I stammered. We moved your bags to the storage closet, he said. You need to take them. I stood in the lobby, surrounded by the cheap neon light, and felt the final humiliation settle over me. I was homeless, truly, properly homeless. I called the only number I had left, a girl named Sarah I had worked with 2 years ago. She had a room in a shared house. I can give you the floor in the living room for a week, Sarah had said when I texted her earlier. But I need $200 for utilities. I transferred the last $200 of the money Cameron had sent me. It left me with $14. I drove to the sublet. It was a basement apartment that smelled of mold and cat litter. Sarah was nice, but the space was cramped. I laid my sleeping bag on the floor between the TV and the radiator. I lay there in the dark, listening to the strangers upstairs walking around. I was 33. I was a professional, and I was sleeping on a floor because my father had sold me out for an insurance payout. My phone buzzed. It was Mercer, Madeline. The text read, "I need you to build a timeline. Every contact you have had with your family since the fire, and every contact you have had with Northline. Cross-reference the times." I sat up. I pulled out my laptop and my notebook. I started writing. Sunday, 11 p.m. Call to Mom. Not our problem. Monday, 9 a.m. Email from Kelsey Rourke. Don't speak to outside parties. Monday, 2 p.m. Call to Mom, asking for storage. She asks us if I plan to sue. Monday, 2:30 p.m. Call from Kelsey Rourke. Accept the settlement. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Visit to Mom's house. Find the bank notices. Tuesday, 10:45 a.m. Call from Kelsey Rourke. Your father would want you to be settled. I looked at the times. Every time I spoke to my parents, Kelsey Rourke called me within an hour. When I told Janine I might sue, Kelsey called with a settlement offer. When I visited the house and saw the bank letters, Kelsey called and mentioned my father by name. They were talking. My parents weren't just protecting themselves. They were reporting on me. They were feeding information to Northline. Janine was calling Kelsey Rourke the moment I hung up the phone, telling her what I knew, what I was thinking, how desperate I was. I was the leak in my own investigation. I stared at the glowing screen, the timeline looking like a map of the knife in my back. I wasn't just fighting Northline. I was fighting the people who had given me life, and they were winning. But they had made one mistake. They thought I was still their daughter. They thought I was still the girl who followed the rules and wanted their approval. They didn't realize that the fire had burned that girl away. I closed the laptop. I had $14 in a sleeping bag. But I had the truth. And tomorrow, I was going to use it to burn them down. The war for the truth didn't start with a bang. It started with a courier envelope taped to the front door of the house where I was sleeping on the floor. It was a cease and desist order. I sat on my sleeping bag, shivering in the damp basement air, and read the heavy cream-colored paper. The letterhead belonged to Garrison and Associates, the shark-like firm representing Northline Residential Group. The language was aggressive, a dense thicket of legalese designed to choke the air out of anyone reading it. Ms. Sanders is hereby ordered to cease the dissemination of defamation, slander, and unverified conjecture regarding the incident at Mapleyard Lofts. Continued harassment of Northline vendors and staff will result in immediate litigation seeking punitive damages. They were scared. I folded the letter and put it in my bag. Upstairs, Sarah, the girl whose floor I was renting, was getting ready for work. I tried to make myself invisible. I was already 3 days late on the $200 I had promised her for the next week, and the shame was a physical weight in my gut. I left the house before she came downstairs. Investigator Mercer was waiting for me at a diner near the burned-out shell of my apartment. He looked energized, a sharp contrast to his usual weary demeanor. He had a stack of files on the table next to his black coffee. "They are fighting back," Mercer said as I slid into the booth. I showed him the letter. "Standard," he said, glancing at it. "It means we are getting close. I served subpoenas yesterday for the server data from Hearthstone facilities, and I requested the raw footage from the security cameras across the street. Northline's lawyers filed an emergency motion to quash the subpoenas this morning. They are claiming trade secrets." "Trade secrets?" I asked. "On a security camera?" Mercer smiled, a dry, humorless expression. "Exactly. It reeks of panic, but it buys them time, and time is what they need to clean up the money trail." He leaned in. I re-interviewed the shift supervisor from the fire station. He said he remembers the maintenance worker, Jason Miller. He remembers Miller trying to go back into the building after the fire started. He said Miller was screaming about the timer. I nodded. Jason told me. He said there was a load management device. Mercer tapped the table. A timer on a bypassed breaker is a delay switch. It allows someone to set the ignition for a time when they are miles away. It turns a manual crime into a mechanical one. If we find that timer in the debris, it is game over. But the debris is tons of wet ash and twisted metal. It is a needle in a haystack. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was an email notification from Truthseeker 884. Meet me, 10 a.m., the public library on 5th, third floor stacks, history section. Come alone. I looked at Mercer. I have to go. I said, be careful. Madeline, he warned. Desperate people do irrational things. The library was quiet, smelling of old paper and dust. I walked to the third floor. The history section was empty, rows of metal shelves creating a maze of shadows. I checked my watch. 10 o'clock exactly. A figure appeared at the end of the aisle. It was a woman, wearing a heavy coat and a beanie pulled low. She didn't look at me. She walked past me. Fast, her head down. As she passed, she shoved a thick manila envelope into my hands. Don't follow me, she whispered. I turned, but she was already rounding the corner, her footsteps silent on the carpet. I looked at the envelope. My hands were trembling. I opened it right there in the aisle, between books on the Civil War and the Industrial Revolution. It was a high-resolution photocopy. It was the contract, the real one. Not the blurry photo from the email. Consulting agreement. Party A, Northline Residential Group. Party B, Sanders Property Solutions, LLC. I scanned the clauses, my heart hammering against my ribs. Scope of work. Vendor acknowledges and agrees to provide risk mitigation planning, asset devaluation strategy, and occupancy reduction protocols for the property located at Mapleyard Lofts. Compensation. A consulting fee of $50,000, payable upon successful execution of the liquidity event. Liquidity event, and there, in black and white, was the signature, Randall J. Sanders, and below it, a date, 3 weeks before the fire, $50,000. My father had sold the safety of 60 tenants for $50,000. That was the price of my home. That was the price of my life. I felt a scream building in my throat, but I swallowed it down. It tasted like bile. I didn't go back to the sublet. I drove straight to the commercial park where my father rented a small office for his consulting business. I had only been there once. It was a single room in a shared executive suite, a place where men who used to be important went to pretend they still had deals to close. I stormed past the receptionist. "Randall!" I shouted. I kicked open the door to suite 204. My father was sitting behind a cheap particle board desk, staring at a laptop. He looked older than I had ever seen him. His skin was gray, hanging loosely on his frame. He jumped when the door slammed against the wall. "Maddie?" he gasped. "What are you doing here?" I threw the envelope on his desk. It landed with a heavy slap. "Tell me what a liquidity event is." "Dad," I said, my voice shaking with a cold, focused rage. He looked at the envelope. He didn't open it. He knew what was inside. He slumped back in his chair, rubbing his face with his hands. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice muffled. "Does it matter?" I asked. "You signed it. You took $50,000 to help them burn down my building." "No," he shouted, sitting up. "No, Madeline, that is not what it was. I read the contract. Dad, asset devaluation, occupancy reduction. You were helping them empty the building so the insurance payout would be cleaner. It was supposed to be a code violation," he pleaded, his eyes wet and terrified. "We were looking for a way to trigger a mandatory evacuation, a condemn order. That is what I was consulting on. How to fail an inspection so the city would shut it down. That is a liquidity event, a forced sale of the land." "You are lying," I said. "You took a bridge loan against the payout. You knew there would be a payout. I thought it would be a small fire," he blurted out. The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed in the corner. He froze, realizing what he had said. He looked at me, his eyes wide with horror. "I didn't mean," he stammered. "I meant, they said they might need a spark, just in the utility room, to trigger the sprinklers, to ruin the electrical panel so the city would condemn the grid." "A spark?" I whispered. "Dad, they used gasoline. They bypassed the breakers. I didn't know that," he cried. He stood up, reaching across the desk toward me. "Maddie, please, you have to believe me. I was desperate. The business. We lost everything on the West Side deal. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. Your mother can't handle being poor. I just needed to bridge the gap." He was crying now. Ugly. Heaving sobs. No one was supposed to get hurt. He said, "It was supposed to be a minor incident. Just enough to clear the building. I made sure they waited until the day shift. I didn't know you were home early." I stared at him. This man who had taught me to ride a bike. This man who had grounded me for lying about a grade. No one was supposed to get hurt. I repeated, "But we did get hurt. Dad, I lost everything." "Deirdre lost everything, and you sat there and watched it on the news and said, 'It wasn't your problem. I was scared,'" he wailed. "If I said anything—" "Northline, they are dangerous people. Maddie, they have leverage on me. You are pathetic." I said. I turned to leave. "Maddie, wait," he yelled. "You can't show that to anyone. If you show that to the police, I go to prison. At my age, I will die in there." "Then maybe you shouldn't have signed it," I said. I walked out. I could hear him sobbing behind the closed door. I didn't feel pity. I felt a hollowness where my heart used to be. I drove back toward the city. I needed to think. I needed to figure out my next move. I parked near the park. I just wanted to sit on a bench and breathe. As I got out of the car, a black SUV pulled up alongside me. The window rolled down. It was Janine. "Get in," she said. I looked at her. She was wearing sunglasses, even though it was overcast. "I have nothing to say to you," I said. "Get in the car." "Madeline," she commanded, "or do I have to make a scene?" I got in. The interior smelled of leather and her perfume. It was warm, hermetically sealed against the grit of the outside world. She didn't look at me. She reached into her purse and pulled out a white envelope. She held it out. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a cashier's check," she said. "For $5,000. I laughed. A bitter, jagged sound. "5,000? That is the going rate for a daughter?" "Dad got 50. This is for a deposit," she said, her voice tight. "On a nice apartment, in a safe neighborhood, far away from here. Maybe in Charleston, or Savannah. You always liked the coast." "And what do I have to do for this generosity?" I asked. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "You sign this," she said. "It is a statement. It says that you were confused, that you were emotional after the fire, that you have no knowledge of any business dealings between your family and Northline, and that you are withdrawing your cooperation with the county investigator." I looked at the paper. It was typed. Cameron must have typed it. "You want me to lie to the fire marshal?" I said. "I want you to protect your family." Janine snapped. Taking off her sunglasses, her eyes were red-rimmed. "Do you think this is a game? Do you think you are some kind of hero? You are going to destroy us. Your father is not a criminal. He made a mistake. He committed fraud, Mom, and conspiracy to commit arson. He was trying to save us," she screamed, slamming her hand on the steering wheel. "To save the house, to save your inheritance." "I don't want an inheritance bought with gasoline," I yelled back. I opened the door. "Take the money." "Madeline," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Please, just take the money and go. If you turn him in, I will never forgive you. I will never speak to you again. You already stopped speaking to me. Mom," I said, "you stopped the night I called you from the curb." I slammed the door and walked away. I heard her shriek my name, but I didn't look back. I walked for an hour. My phone buzzed. It was Cameron. "We need to talk. I'm outside your sublet." I took a bus back to the house. Cameron was sitting on the stoop, looking like a man waiting for a firing squad. I walked up to him. "Did you write the statement?" I asked. "The one Mom tried to make me sign?" He nodded, looking at his shoes. "Did you know?" I asked. "About the contract?" "I knew about the consulting fee," he said quietly. "Dad asked me to run the envelope to the Northline Courier. He said it was for debt cleanup. He said he was helping them restructure their loans." "And you believed him?" "I wanted to believe him." "Maddie," Cameron said, looking up. "I knew things were bad. I knew he was desperate. But I didn't think it was this." He stood up. "I saw the contract today." He said, Dad showed me after you left. And I threw up in the trash can, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash. It wasn't much, maybe $300. This is all I have on me, he said. I can't access the accounts. Mom locked everything down. But, Maddie, be careful. Dad told me who the contact at Northline is. It's a guy named Vargo. He's not a businessman. He's a fixer. If you push this, they will hurt you. Are you going to help me? I asked. Will you talk to Mercer? Cameron flinched. I can't send Dad to jail. I just can't do it. Then get out of my way, I said. He walked away, shoulders slumped. He was a good man who was too weak to be a good person. I went inside and sat on my sleeping bag. I needed to organize. I needed to turn the chaos into a weapon. I started a binder. It was an old habit from my paralegal days. When the world is falling apart, you organize the exhibits. Exhibit A, the voicemail. The building situation. Exhibit B, the bank notice. Default imminent. Exhibit C, the photo of the contract. Exhibit D, the timeline of calls between Janine and Kelsey Rourke. Exhibit E, Jason Miller's statement about the timer. I taped everything into the binder. It was ugly. It was undeniable. My phone rang. It was Mercer. I have news, he said, and you aren't going to like it. What is it? I pulled the file on a property fire from 2 years ago. He said, the Riverside Arms, another converted mill, owned by a subsidiary of Apex Capital, Apex, the company my father represented at the zoning hearing. It burned? I asked. Total loss. Mercer said. The cause was listed as undetermined electrical failure. The insurance payout was $4 million. Northline bought Mapleyard Lofts 3 months later. It's a cycle, I said. They burn one to buy the next. Exactly. It is a Ponzi scheme of arson. And your father's name is on the permit applications for the Riverside renovation, too. I closed my eyes. It wasn't just one mistake. It was a career. Madeline, Mercer said, his voice grave. The insurance company for Mapleyard just issued their determination letter. They are offering a global settlement. They are denying the total loss claim based on tenant negligence, but offering a goodwill payout of 10 cents on the dollar. Let me guess, I said. If we sign a release, identical language to the Northline housing voucher. Mercer said, the insurance company and the landlord are coordinating. They want to pay everyone off before the arson ruling becomes official. He paused. I need you to come in. Madeline, tomorrow. Why? I need a formal statement. He said, I need you to go on record about the contract you saw. I need you to hand over the digital copy, and I need you to testify that your father admitted to the consulting arrangement. If I do that, I said, my voice trembling. He goes to prison. Yes, Mercer said. He does. And if you don't, Northline walks away with millions. And they will likely do it again. And next time, someone might not wake up. I looked at the binder. I looked at the picture of my family I had saved from the fire. The one from my college graduation. We looked so happy, so perfect. It was all a lie. I will do it, I said. I will come in tomorrow at 9. Good, Mercer said. Stay safe tonight. Lock your doors. I hung up. I felt a strange sense of calm. The decision was made. I was going to burn my family to the ground to save myself. I needed to clear my head. I went for a walk around the block, breathing in the cold night air. I walked for 20 minutes, just putting one foot in front of the other. When I got back to the sublet, the front door was unlocked. I froze. I knew I had locked it. I pushed the door open. Sarah was gone. She worked the night shift at the hospital. The house was silent. I walked down the stairs to the basement. My heart stopped. My sleeping bag had been slashed open. The white stuffing scattered across the floor like snow. My clothes were thrown everywhere. My laptop was smashed on the concrete floor. The screen shattered, but they hadn't taken anything of value. They hadn't taken the laptop. They hadn't taken my jewelry box. They had moved the binder. I had left it hidden under the mattress. Now, it was sitting perfectly centered on the pillow of my ruined sleeping bag. It was open, and right in the middle of the open page, someone had stabbed a kitchen knife through the paper, pinning the contract photo to the pillow. I stood there, staring at the knife. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. We can get you anywhere. I backed out of the room, my breath coming in short. Terrified gasps. I ran up the stairs. I ran out the front door. I didn't stop running until I reached the main road. I wasn't safe. My parents couldn't protect me. The police couldn't protect me. I was alone in the dark, and the wolves were closing in. But as I stood under the street lamp, shivering in the cold, I felt something else underneath the fear. I felt the heat. They wanted me scared. They wanted me silent. Instead, they had just ensured that I would never stop until every single one of them was in handcuffs. I pulled out my phone. It was cracked, but it worked. I dialed Mercer. I am not waiting until 9. I said, I am coming in now. The knife through the binder was the moment the fear broke. It snapped, clean and sharp, leaving behind a cold, crystalline clarity. I was no longer a daughter trying to understand a betrayal. I was a prosecutor building a case. I didn't sleep that night. I packed my remaining belongings, a pitifully small stack of clothes and the evidence binder, into trash bags. At 8 in the morning, I walked into the First National Bank downtown. I rented the smallest safety deposit box they had. I placed the binder inside the long metal drawer. I placed the flash drive containing the emails next to it. I placed the blurry photo of the contract on top. When the banker slid the box into the wall and handed me the key, I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. They could slash my sleeping bag. They could toss my room. They could follow me, but they couldn't get to the truth anymore. It was locked behind 2 inches of steel and a camera system that backed up to a server Northline couldn't touch. I didn't go back to the sublet. I couldn't. I called Chloe, a junior paralegal at my firm. We weren't close. We mostly exchanged pleasantries about the coffee machine, but she had looked at me with genuine horror when I came into work wearing the same pants 3 days in a row. I need help, I told her. I am not safe where I'm staying. Chloe didn't ask questions. She didn't ask for a deposit. She didn't ask me to sign a liability waiver. I have a pull-out couch. She said, come over, I will make lasagna. That night, sitting in Chloe's small, cluttered living room, eating burnt lasagna while her golden retriever rested his heavy head on my knee, I realized something devastating. This woman, who barely knew my middle name, offered me more safety in 5 minutes than my parents had offered me in 33 years. My parents claimed to protect the family, but they only ever meant the reputation. They only ever meant the assets. The next morning, the landscape of the war changed. Investigator Mercer's office released a public notice. A formal investigative hearing was scheduled regarding the origin of the fire at Mapleyard Lofts. Subpoenas were issued for the executives of Northline Residential Group and the principals of Hearthstone Facilities. The word spread through the tenant group chat like a virus. I went to the community center that evening to meet with the tenant advocate again. The mood in the room had shifted. Before, there was just shock and grief. Now, there was division. When I walked in, a hush fell over the room. Mr. Henderson, the man who had screamed fire in the hallway, walked up to me. He looked tired, wearing a coat that was too big for him. Is it true? He asked. You are the one pushing for the criminal investigation? I am. I said, we deserve to know why it happened. We deserve to get paid. A woman shouted from the back. It was Mrs. Gable from Unit 202. She stood up, her face red. Because of you. Northline pulled the settlement offer. They said all negotiations are frozen pending the hearing. My kids are sleeping in a shelter because you want to play detective. I looked at her. I felt her anger like a slap. They were going to pay you pennies, I said, and they were going to make you sign away your rights. If we prove arson, the insurance has to pay out the full policy, not the capped settlement. And how long will that take? Mrs. Gable yelled. A year? 2 years? We need money now. You are making it worse. Madeline, you are selfish. Selfish. The word hung in the air. I looked around the room. I saw nods of agreement. They were desperate. And Northline had successfully framed me as the obstacle between them and their survival. I walked out of the center, my head down. I wasn't a hero. To them, I was just another disaster. I reached my car and found Cameron leaning against the driver's side door. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His suit was rumpled, his tie loose. "Go away." "Cameron," I said, unlocking the door. "Maddie." "Please," he said, blocking my path. "You have to stop. Dad is on the edge. He was in the hospital this morning. Chest pains." I stopped. My hand froze on the door handle. "Is it a heart attack?" I asked, the old instinct of concern flaring up despite everything. "It was a panic attack," Cameron admitted, looking away. "But the doctor says his blood pressure is stroke level. And Mom, she can't handle this. She is falling apart. She barely gets out of bed." I looked at him. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes. "And what about me? Cam?" I asked quietly. "I am homeless. I was threatened with a knife. I lost everything. Can I handle it? Or does my ability to handle pain just make it okay for you to pile more on me?" "It isn't like that," he pleaded. "We just want this to be over. If you drop the statement, if you just let the insurance company settle, we can all move on. Dad can pay back the loan. He can retire. We can be a family again." "We were never a family," I said. "We were a corporation, and I was just a liability." "Maddie, don't say that. Tell them I am not stopping." I said, "Tell them the hearing is happening, and tell Dad to hire a criminal defense attorney." I got in the car and drove away. I watched Cameron in the rearview mirror, standing alone under the streetlight, a small, defeated figure. He was grieving a life that was already dead. That night, my phone rang at 2 a.m. I knew who it was before I looked. I picked it up. "Hello? Randall." There was silence on the line, just the sound of jagged, wet breathing. I didn't light the match. "Maddie," he whispered. His voice was cracked, unrecognizable. "I swear on your grandmother's grave, I didn't light it." "But you bought the gasoline, didn't you?" I asked into the dark room. "Metaphorically speaking, I helped them prepare," he admitted. The words came out in a rush. As if he couldn't hold them back anymore, they came to me, Vargo, the man from Northline. He said they needed to reset the asset. He said the maintenance costs were bleeding them dry. He asked me how to structure a loss event so the insurance would cover the debt. "And you told them?" I said, "I told them how to document the negligence." He said, "I told them to ignore the sprinkler citations so the claim would look like incompetence rather than malice. I told them to empty the ground floor units so the casualty risk was lower." "You consulted on how to stage a disaster," I said. "I thought it would be a small fire," he cried. "A trash can fire in the utility room, just enough to trigger the suppression system and ruin the drywall. Enough to get the building condemned. I never thought they would burn the whole thing. I never thought—" "You didn't think," I said. "You just signed the contract and took the $50,000? I needed the money. Maddie, the bridge loan. They were going to take the house, so you traded my house for yours." I said, "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You bet my life against your mortgage, and you lost. Maddie, please, if you testify, it's 20 years. I can't do 20 years. Then you should have thought about that before you signed your name to a felony." I said. I hung up. I lay in the dark, tears finally streaming down my face. He hadn't called to apologize. He hadn't called to ask if I was safe. He had called to beg for his own skin. He was a drowning man trying to climb on top of me to breathe. The next day, the email came. "Truth Seeker 884. Meeting confirmed. 11 a.m. The Riverwalk. Bench 14. I called in sick to work. I drove to the river. The bench was facing the water, away from the path. A woman was sitting there. It was the same woman from the library. I sat down next to her, leaving a foot of space between us. "Who are you?" I asked. She turned to look at me. She had sharp features, dark eyes, and a mouth set in a permanent line of bitterness. I recognized the bone structure immediately. "I am Vanessa Rourke," she said. "Kelsey's sister, The property manager. I said. The fixer. Vanessa corrected. Kelsey isn't a property manager. She is a cleaner. She moves from building to building for Northline whenever they have a problem. Rent control, squatters, structural issues. Kelsey shows up. 6 months later, the problem is gone, usually via eviction or accident. Why are you helping me? I asked. Because she stole my inheritance, Vanessa said flatly. Our mother died 3 years ago. Kelsey forged the will. She took everything. She thinks she is untouchable because she does dirty work for powerful men. I want to see her in a cage. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is from her iCloud, Vanessa said. I guessed her password. It wasn't hard. It was her own birthday. I unfolded the paper. It was a screenshot of a digital calendar. October 14th, 4 days before the fire. 1 p.m. Lunch meeting. R. Sanders. The Oak Ridge Club. Notes. Finalize risk protocols. Transfer consulting fee. Discuss tenant containment. Tenant containment. That was me. That was Deirdre. That was Mr. Henderson. We weren't people. We were livestock to be contained while the barn burned. This proves they met. I said, this proves the conspiracy. It proves your father was in the planning meeting 4 days before the match was struck. Vanessa said. She stood up. Burn them. Madeline, she said. Burn them all. She walked away, disappearing into the lunchtime crowd. I drove straight to Mercer's office. I didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist waved me back. Mercer was standing by a whiteboard covered in timelines and photos. I handed him the calendar screenshot. He looked at it for a long time. This connects the dots, he said quietly. We have the motive. We have the method. The timer was found in the debris this morning. By the way, melted, but identifiable. And now we have the meeting. So what happens now? I asked. Mercer turned to me. The case has been criminally referred to the district attorney. He said, we aren't calling it an accident anymore. It is arson in the first degree, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and reckless endangerment. Will there be arrests? Soon, he said. But Madeline, you need to be prepared. Once the warrants are issued, your name will be on the witness list. The defense attorneys will come for you. They will try to paint you as a disgruntled daughter. They will try to say you are doing this for revenge. I am doing it for revenge. I said, but that doesn't mean I am lying. I left his office feeling a strange, vibrating energy. It was the feeling of the roller coaster cresting the hill. The drop was coming. I went to the law firm. I tried to focus on a merger agreement, but the words swam on the page. At 3 o'clock. I heard a commotion in the lobby. I looked up through the glass wall of the conference room. Janine was there. She was wearing a trench coat, her hair wild, her makeup smeared. She was shouting at the receptionist. I need to see my daughter, she screamed. She is in there. I know she is in there. My stomach dropped. I stood up and walked into the lobby. The entire office had gone silent. Partners were looking out of their doors. Mom, I said, keeping my voice low. You need to leave. She turned on me. She looked deranged. A woman whose entire world was collapsing and who had decided to take the pillars down with her. You, she spat, pointing a finger at me. You ungrateful child. Mom, stop. Stop? She laughed, a high, hysterical sound. You want me to stop? You are ruining us. Madeline, the police were at the house. They took your father's laptop. They took his phone. Good. I said, good? She shrieked. She lunged at me, grabbing my shoulders, her nails dug into my skin. After everything we did for you, we paid for your college. We paid for your car. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? By sending your father to prison over a stupid apartment? It wasn't an apartment. Mom, I yelled, shoving her off me. It was my life. And he burned it down to pay his debts. He did it for the family, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. He did it for us. I am the family, I shouted back, my voice echoing off the marble floors. I am the family you sacrificed. She froze. The words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She looked around the room, realizing for the first time that 50 people were watching her. She straightened her coat. She wiped her face with a shaking hand. Her eyes went cold, the hysteria replaced by a deep, poisonous hatred. "You are no family of mine," she hissed. "You are dead to me." She turned and walked out. I stood in the lobby, shaking. Chloe walked up to me and put a hand on my back. "I am so sorry." "Maddie," she whispered. "I am not." I said. I went back to my desk. I packed my bag. I was done with work for the day. I had one last thing to do. I drove to Oak Ridge. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns. I pulled into the driveway. The front door was unlocked. I walked in. The house was silent. It felt like a funeral home. I found them in the living room. Randall was sitting in his leather armchair, staring at the unlit fireplace. He was holding a glass of scotch. Cameron was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. Janine was standing by the window, looking out at the darkening street. They didn't look up when I walked in. I stood in the center of the room. "I have one question," I said. Randall looked at me. His eyes were empty. "Did you ever plan to help me?" I asked. If the fire hadn't happened, if the plan had worked perfectly and the building was just condemned, I would still have been evicted. I would still have been homeless. "Did you plan to help me then? Or was I just going to be collateral damage either way?" Randall opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at his glass. He couldn't answer, because the answer was no. Cameron let out a sob. It was a raw, broken sound. We were protecting the family. Janine said from the window, her voice hard as stone, "We did what we had to do, protecting the family." I repeated. I looked at them, the three of them, a closed circuit of dysfunction. I pulled the keys to the house off my keychain. I threw them on the coffee table. They clattered loudly in the silence. "I hope the insurance money was worth it," I said, "because it is going to cost you everything." I turned and walked out. I walked down the driveway, past the perfectly trimmed hedges, past the luxury cars bought with debt and lies. I got into my car. I didn't cry. I felt light. I felt clean. I drove back to the city. I met Mercer at a diner near the courthouse. He slid a thick, sealed envelope across the table. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a supplemental report." He said, "It triggered a victim rights notification because of your statement." I picked it up. It felt heavy. It contains the chain of communications. Mercer said, "We subpoenaed the emails between Northline's legal counsel and your father. It is all there, the fee structure, the agreement to conceal the safety violations, and there is something else." "What?" "There is a list of other properties," Mercer said. 5 other buildings owned by the same trust. All of them are currently underinsured. All of them have recent consulting contracts with Sanders Property Solutions. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just doing it for this one. I whispered, he was going to do it again. He was a partner in the firm. "Madeline," Mercer said, "he wasn't just a consultant. He had equity in the scheme." I stared at the envelope. "This is the nail in the coffin," Mercer said. "If you hand this to the district attorney, they won't just charge him with fraud. They will charge him under the RICO Act, organized crime. They will seize the house. They will seize his accounts. Your mother will be left with nothing." I looked at the envelope. I thought about the night on the curb. I thought about the cold voice on the phone saying, "Not our problem." I thought about the knife in my sleeping bag. I thought about Janine screaming, "After everything we did for you." I looked at Mercer. I picked up the envelope. "Do it," I said. Mercer nodded solemnly. I walked out of the diner into the cool night air of Briar Glen. I held the envelope against my chest. It contained the destruction of the Sanders name. It contained the end of my father's life as a free man. It contained the ruin of my mother's world. I looked up at the sky. It was clear, the stars sharp and bright. They had told me not to make it a legal war. They had told me to move on. They had told me to be a good daughter. I took a deep breath. I was done being a good daughter. I walked toward the district attorney's office. the envelope heavy in my hand, ready to light the match that would finally, truly, burn it all down. Thank you so much for listening to After My Apartment Burned. My parents said, "Not our problem," until the fire investigator arrived. This story was a journey through betrayal, gaslighting, and the hard choices we have to make when the people who are supposed to protect us become the ones we need protection from. I hope Madeline's strength resonated with you. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to choose between family and the truth? And what did you think of that final decision? Please don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, retribution, and the grit it takes to survive. Share your thoughts in English below. I read every single one. Until next time, stay safe and trust your instincts.